Some plants are elegant. Some plants are beautiful. And then there's the plants that are going to be in this video where it looks like somebody was having a very odd day when they were designing them. Hi, my name is Memo. This is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me. It's tropical houseplants. So yes, there are, as I said, a lot of plants out there that are beautiful. They're very elegant. They are the kind of thing that you're just like, this looks like a painter may have created this. It's so quintessentially a plant, if that makes sense. But then you also get the bizarre ones, the ones that don't look like anything you've ever seen before, or even plants that you're just like, how are you existing if you look like this? And yes, I do know that a lot of this is adaptations that these plants have in order to survive, not just survive, but actually thrive in their native environments. And there's usually very good reasons that they look the way that they look, because evolution means that they've adapted, they've become, and they morphologically, that just means the way that they look, is the way that it is because of their environment. It's a reaction or an adjustment to their environment. So today, I thought, let's have a little look-see at some of the weirdos around my collection. And for the people that have been here for a while, you know I like the weirdos. These are some of the weirdest plants that I have currently in my collection. And let's start off strong, shall we? So this is the plant that I'm always just like, oh look, it's like a business in the front and a party in the back. Mainly because it's supposed to have an entirely red back, or a splotchy but larger splotches of redness in the back. Now for the ladies out there that pointed out something that obviously I was never going to be able to make that connection without your assistance, so thank you. But also, why? Because I cannot unsee it now. You might think this looks like something else. And that's part of the reason. So, I mean, this is, and I'll put the names on screens rather than me kind of like verbally saying them, so to speak, in this video. This is a plant that's also really, let me see if I can bring it in and maybe hide myself, and you can see how fuzzy those leaves are. If I'm not mistaken, this is part of the Gesneriad family. This is also what's known as, it's one of the goldfish plants. But this is a weirdo because not only does it have the fuzzy leaves, it has got the redness in the back, but it's also the one that does the thing that I was talking about on another video where you get one leaf, a large leaf, and then a tiny leaf. And then you get the other side is a large leaf, and then a tiny leaf. And it's just one of those things that I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense. Why would you keep that kind of like, it's like a little vestigial leaf there that's kind of left over. And it's grown quite happily. It lost some of its lower leaves recently because of watering. I potted it and it really didn't like it, but it was drying out a bit too much. It might have also been because I've left the berries on there to kind of mature. So maybe I was supposed to take them off at any time, but I mean, it's still a happy plant. It's not enjoying the summer as much as the rest of my plants, but we'll see how it gets along. But this is a plant that I never knew anything about, and I'm quite glad I own this because it's a little, and it's a very petable plant. It's very much a petable plant. It's a bit of a plant weirdo. But yeah, this is one that I'm just like, how? And that's the thing throughout all of this video, my biggest question for all of these plants, I'm just like, it's so ingenious that you've developed all of these features. Why? What are you struggling with? Or what are you working with in your natural environment that meant that you need to have the slight red blotches? Yes, a lot of the times we know that red blotches means the understory of the forest. And the fuzziness usually means it's kind of slightly trying to react a bit to water. Potentially also, if it's this fuzzy, it might be because it's not a nice texture for animals or herbivores to be biting into. It's exceptionally interesting why some of these weirdos are as weird as they are. And then a plant that's quite different to one we were looking at just now, and do stick around until the end of the video. I've got one that's a particularly unusual looking plant that's going to be at the end of the video. But yes, this is the Labisia Turtle Back. And I mean, do I need to explain why this is making the list? Because, and actually a lot of the Labisias, I might be mispronouncing that as well, have got very, very odd leaf textures. If you've never had a chance to Google Labisia plants in general, especially the ones that may be being sold to people as houseplants, I know you get a lot of variety when you're looking at some of the kind of sellers in the Far East. If you're importing plants, you'll get a good variety of Labisias, not just the turtleback. And the fact that at least here we can get turtlebacks a bit easier than we were able to get it before, I'm really happy, because I've been wanting to add this to my collection for years. But you do kind of look at this and go, okay, it's got a leathery feel, so there is one thing for it, but you cannot get over the fact that people just like, it looks like a turtle's back, because, and I used to have both turtles and tortoises. This makes sense. And again, okay, so the leatheriness of the leaves, I would imagine it's in order to kind of slough off some of the water. It might be living in a very high humid environment. I'm also touching this, and this is really interesting because this has only just started happening now where it's getting warmer, and I'm getting sticky residue at the back, and it's not, this plant has never had pests. This has got extrafloral nectaries now, quite a few, and I'll see if I can bring it in, and maybe if it will focus, if my camera will play ball, you might be able to see some droplets of water potentially, or droplets of like kind of sticky nectar. My fingers are sticky now. But this is another one that's just such a weirdo of a plant. And I did give a bit of an update because some people were asking, look, how are you growing this plant? Do let me know down below. I do think that this is one that I'm going to be featuring as one of my kind of reviews very, very soon, or it might even be in the next few weeks, basically, because I know that this might be one that people aren't as aware of, or they've heard scary things about this. And I'm not telling you that those things are not true in terms of how difficult it could be, but my experiences so far with this as a plant have been absolutely fine. And I remember when I was doing some of my initial research online for this plant, when I was getting it in my care, and I'm just like, right, what do I need to know? All of these things. I don't know if I'm the only one that does this, but whenever I pick up a plant, I always search for the mature form. So if I can find an image of what it might look like, either in nature, if it's a mature specimen, or if people have been growing it in houseplant collections, that also gives me another little bit of a tip. As in like, oh, I'm finding mature looking plants that people have taken from their houseplants, and I'm not just finding botanical pictures. That tells me something. That tells me something. That tells me a lot. But this is one that I think, from what I've seen online, at some point when it does grow, and I was only able to find mature specimen pictures of this easily enough in nature. So that did also tell me something. But this is one that eventually will lose some of its lowest leaves, and it will just be tufty at the top. So think some of the dracaenas where people were just like, they just assume that it's just going to continue growing and just have leaves all along its stem, even if it's really tall. And then they realize quite quickly, not all dracaenas, but some dracaenas, it eludes me now as to which dracaenas, but they're the ones that end up with a bare stem and something that looks like a palm, or palm leaves at the top. This does the same thing. And I'm just like, I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that. I think that's quite an interesting thing that this plant will do. Think of your Aglaonema pictum tricolor. I know people have issues with the fact that it looks like that, but if you go into it knowingly, it's less of an issue. But yes, another one of my lovely, lovely, lovely weirdos. You knew it wasn't going to be a video of mine when I'm talking about weird plants if I didn't bring this one up. And actually, you might have already seen it. If not, trypophobia. Trigger warning for anybody out there that has got that as an issue. You might want to skip to the next chapter. Also, as an FYI, I try for every single one of my videos to have chapters down below, so you can kind of skip around if you need to. But yes, the ultimate trypophobia plant, the Begonia melanobullata. I have also got the ferox down below as well. But this is the one, remember, that it was struggling and it was pretty much turned into nothing. It is bouncing back. It's doing its seasonal thing in my space where it's bouncing back. For the people that might not know, this is a plant that year after year will do great. It will have all of this immense growth that happens in the summer, and then it will pretty much keep all of these leaves. If I've done everything right, it will be completely fine. It will look like it's just frozen in time for most of the winter, and then just as spring comes in, it just goes, nope, I'm done now. I'm done. I'm going to go back down to a little stump, and you're going to have to regrow all of those little leaves all over again. The first time it happened, I'm just like, why? What have I done wrong? What have I done things? But 4 years later, when it's done it every year, it's just become a bit of a seasonal thing that I expect from this plant. There's going to be a point of the year, which is annoying because it's usually when everything else is kickstarting. This one kind of takes a massive knockback. It does that. And there's so many begonias that I could put onto this list, but I thought I'd go with kind of the obvious one because look at it. I mean, those spiky bullets, and that is, by the way, the name is melanobullata. So melano is something in Greek that is dark or black potentially. So you can see that the bullets or the little spikes are kind of a darker color. And if I show you the back, and this is the trypophobia bit, they are actually hollow. And the hollows themselves are red on this, which is really, really cool. And hopefully that might focus enough. You can see a tiny bit of fuzziness or pubescence when it's fuzzy on the actual, each individual little spike has got one little kind of filament or hair. It is so kooky. And if you see some of the youngest leaves, if you can see that one there, it is super hairy when it first comes out. It still has some fuzziness that happens on the petiole, but not as much as when it's first coming in. And in terms of evolution, that would make sense in its space, especially for the youngest leaves. If they've got that much fuzziness, guess what happens when there's that much fuzziness? A lot of the pests can't attach to the actual petiole to potentially think of like pests that are like sucking of sap. They can't attach easily to the bit that they need to attach into to pull the sap out of the plant, so they don't, which then means that this leaf, when it's this immature and it's got this much fuzz, has a chance to grow up and become a full-size leaf at that point. And it's interesting with this plant as well because the petiole starts getting a bit more harder, not fully barky, but it kind of leans towards bark, which again is something that would deter the pests. So at every single stage of this plant, you can see that it's evolved in order to protect that petiole and that initial early leaf as well. But I mean, when you're talking about kooky plants and weird plants that you're just like, this looks like it could be alien. It really does. And you're just like, in what world does spikes... By the way, these, I'll touch these. These are not... Don't think of kind of sharp spikes that you might do on a cactus. These are super, super soft. I don't want to squish it too much because they're also quite delicate. You could probably like end up like squishing them entirely. But super, super unusual plants. And again, one of these ones, and I'll say this until I'm blue in the face in this video, what in your environment has caused you to evolve like this? What's causing this? And also a lot of the times we need to remember when it comes to evolution, the things that originally caused something to change the morphology or the look of a plant might no longer exist. Does that make sense? So something that plants may have done to, or may have evolved in order to deal with, I'm going to use a very extreme example here, dinosaurs, and obviously dinosaurs don't exist anymore, but they haven't changed morphologically, because the thing that we always forget a lot of the times when we talk about evolution is evolution doesn't happen overnight. It's over a very long period of time. I'm using a very extreme example here, but some of the things that you're seeing here might be in reaction to something that no longer exists in their environment, which makes it infinitely harder for a lot of the scientists when they're just kind of going, oh, there's nothing there. Sometimes it's really obvious, but sometimes it's just that there's nothing there that would explain this now. And that's where it gets interesting. But yes, the Begonia melanobullata. The next plant I can't easily pick up. Hopefully you might be able to see some of the leaves here. It's behind some of the other leaves. If not, I'll see about putting a picture or a video here. The Syngonium chiapense. And you might be looking at it going, but Memo, this doesn't look weird. Might not look weird because it's just got a heart-shaped leaf, which in itself is weird for a Syngonium, because check it, a lot of the Syngoniums will have that trilobal kind of type of leaves. This has got heart-shaped leaves, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't develop into a three-lobed leaf. I'll double check this during editing, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't develop into that. But the thing that's weird about the chiapense, barring the fact that it is still one of my favorite plants because it's so easy to grow, even more so than some of my other Syngoniums, I'll have to say that for a fact. I know experiences might vary. I always put this as a caveat on most of my videos. But the thing that I find really odd about that, and I'm just like, what was the reasoning behind that, is the actual texture of the leaves. And hopefully the picture, it's a difficult thing because you're going to have to take my word for it unless you've had a chance to feel this. And I know a lot of you have had the chiapense, have still got the chiapense, or have recently got the chiapense, so please sound off down below if you want to add your 2 cents into this. But it's got a very unique leaf texture, leaf feel, versus a lot of other houseplants. So a lot of the times, like for instance, this is the Traversia Burkii, it's got very stiff type leaves, even though you're seeing a bit drooping here. A bit of information for people that are always wondering why this might droop, because I'm filming in the blistering heat, and this plant does go a bit like limpish. In the evening, most of these leaves will kind of puff up again, but it doesn't live its best life in the summer heat, basically. But I'm doing everything that I can to keep it happy, but you know. But the chiapense specifically, its texture isn't leathery. It is, and this is the closest thing that most of us can relate it to, it is rubbery. Which is hysterical because right here is what's known as the rubber plant, so the Ficus elastica, because the sap, I think if I'm not mistaken, is where kind of the material that they originally used to use for rubber comes from. But this plant has got rubbery leaves. It's really, really, really odd and really bizarre. Again, very, very, very petable. It's very, very petable as a plant because you're just like, why? Why have you got that? More so than like, because it's so similar, you would imagine the things that a leathery leaf would do, the rubbery leaf would do as well. So why specifically does a chiapense, the weird chiapense in that respect, have got rubbery leaves? What extra is it kind of dealing with that just a box standard leathery tropical leaf wouldn't be good enough? I don't know, but it is one of those things to kind of go down a rabbit hole of Google research. And you knew I had to bring it. Is it the Operculicarya? Operculicarya. Put the name somewhere on there. But the hardest plant for me to get a proper close-up because it is so, so dainty. I'll see if this is not reading well on the screen. I'll see if I can put it in front of my white t-shirt. Hopefully you might be able to see it a bit better. Otherwise, I'll put a picture here. But this plant and the little baby, the Sophora prostrata, hi to all of my like New Zealand viewers out there. I know it's a weed in your location, but very, very interesting plants because this one specifically, which I think is slightly different to the Sophora prostrata, the little baby, this one has got caudiciform kind of roots. And a lot of people, I think when I was looking at this online, do also try to grow this as a bonsai. I don't think the little baby that they do that. And you can see it's quite diminutive. It's not a huge, huge plant. But the thing that's very, very odd about this is those tiny, 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 tiny little leaves. And again, the Sophora prostrata also has tiny, tiny leaves. That one's its common name, the little baby, would kind of hint at that. And you're sitting there looking at this plant going, oh, how? Because both of them have got barky stems, so it feels a bit like the bark of a tree, but the leaves are absolutely diddy. And you're just like, this must be, this is what I mean. It must be an evolutionary thing that has happened due to your native environment. But what could that be? It could be something like bright light, too bright of a light, or it might be that maybe the soil. So anytime you start seeing leaves that are getting smaller, because I think this is something that people don't always realize, think about the humble cacti. Thin, thin spikes. Those are technically what used to be the leaves of those plants. Think about it that way. So essentially anything that's in a really kind of water poor location will try to minimize the size of its leaves. Again, I'm assuming here, but I love these types of videos because you can sit there going, I'm assuming because I know this and this. So x plus y equals z, maybe? It's not always as straightforward as that. And it's not always entirely correct either. But you would assume if there's small, small leaves, almost like needle-like leaves, think of your, something that everybody's seen is a lavender plant, for example. You know, those leaves are almost like little needles and they're fuzzy as well. That is because a lot of the lavender plants are kind of adapted to growing in very arid, very rocky, very sandy conditions. So they need to retain as much of that moisture. And having big leaves is not a good thing for them at that point because they're getting enough sun that even the small leaves can help it photosynthesize. But smaller leaves means that there's less likelihood that there's going to be moisture that's going to be lost due to transpiration. So yes, the Operculicarya and the little baby, of course, is going to be some of the weirdest plants in my collection. And as promised, the last one is definitely one that is for the collectors out there, because any sane individual that's looking to just get some houseplants to pretty up their house would probably not be going for this. And I do not have this plant anymore, but hopefully if I can find pictures of my specimen, I will add it here. If not, I will find a picture from online and add it here so you can see it. The dead stick Euphorbia, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's Euphorbia. I mean, what's the expression? A face only a mother could love? An appearance that only avid plant hobbyists and plant collectors would be into, because for the average person, it's just like, why would I buy a plant that looks like I've already killed the plant? I can do that without buying a plant for X amount of money more than a regular plant, just so it can look like it's dead. Whilst the rest of us are just like, tell me more. Look at you. You are so kooky, weird, and unusual. But again, this is the extreme example of what I was just talking about before with the tiny, tiny leaves. If I'm not mistaken, this barely has any foliage on it. It just literally looks like dead sticks. It looks like a plant that has died in the ground and all you're left is those dried twiggy sticks. But it's an evolutionary adaptation for this environment, because it might not just be, I think it's a Madagascar native. I might be wrong. I'll correct myself if I am. But this might not just be the fact that this plant is living in slightly more arid conditions, but it might also be that, you know what, the best way to look unattractive or basically entirely unassuming to potential animals or herbivores that are going to munch away at you, where they might do for all the plants around you, is to look like you're already dead. Because if a plant, a herbivore specifically, is looking at you going, why would I go to you? You just look like dead sticks. I don't need no toothpicks. I need some vegetables. You don't look like a vegetable or something green to eat. This is why these plants look like this. And this is definitely a plant that I want to re-add to my collection when I have a bit more space. Although I do hear you saying, but it doesn't take up that much space. I know, but don't encourage me. I encourage myself enough as it is. I do occasionally need to say no for the time being to some plants. This is one that I'm saying no for the time being, but I will re-add it. Super weird, super kooky, because again, other than us, we're really desperately into plants. Who would buy this? Who would think that this is pretty and put it in their collection? That's what I mean. It's not your usual kind of elegant and pretty plant. It's just weird. It's a weirdo. And again, just look at it. It is essentially what the common name is. It looks like dead sticks. But yes, this is only a small selection of some of my weirdos. I've had loads of weirdos over the years. I thought I'd focus a bit more, with the exception of the last one, on plants that I've currently got into my collection. I'm trying to think, there's probably a few other weirdos that I should have spotlighted and I haven't done that yet. I could always do another one of these videos at some point in the future. I do know that I'm not the only one. I definitely have found my community on here with all of you, and I know that a lot of you like your weirdos. Did I miss your favorite weirdo? Let me know down below. Like, is there one that I need to be aware of? You just like, remember, how have you not discovered this one yet? Feel free to encourage me when it comes to things like that to potentially look at and buy more plants, because it's that time of the year where it's warm and sunny and you're just like, oh yes, I could buy a plant now. It's a lot easier to say no in winter because you're just like, oh no, but how am I going to get this plant? It's going to freeze in the post and all these things. Now it's just a bit like, meh, that's a future memo problem. Let's get it now and hope for the best. It'll be all right. But yes, I think that's everything I wanted to cover today. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.